What's going on, everyone? I'm your host Derek and welcome to LPE, the show where we attempt to play every single game so you don't have to. Today we are playing 8 Eyes, developed by Thinking Rabbit and released in 1988 for the NES. This is actually the first game we played in the series that wasn't a port to the NES, which makes sense as it definitely felt more along the lines of what I remember playing as a kid. In 8 Eyes there are 2 primary characters, Orin and your falcon, Cutterus. I'm just going to go ahead and assume it was meant to be Curtis but was lost in translation. For an NES platformer, this game was reasonably fun. I felt motivated to want to get better so I could proceed further, which says a lot in comparison to 720 that we played earlier this week. According to the manual, the game takes place in a post-apocalyptic future. I guess some things never change, and mankind is recovering from nuclear war, etc, etc, etc. You know the rest at this point if you played any game that was released in 2018. The goal is to get through the 7 levels, then proceed to the 8th level, the House of Ruth, to get the final jewel. The surrounding 7 levels can be played in any order, but after doing some reading online, I discovered that the boss at the end of each level are weak to a certain sword obtained from the level you finished prior. So there is a secret order that you can slowly decode as you play the game. On the topic of secrets, apparently you must place the final 8 jewels in the correct order at the end of the game or you just straight up lose. I didn't make it to this point, but my god, can you imagine getting to the end and losing because you placed the jewels in the wrong order? Talk about a plot twist. Again, there are clues throughout the levels that do hint at the order that you must place them, but after going through every level at least 3 times, I only found one of these clues. Clues are generally hidden in pieces of the walls and are only uncovered once you hit them with your sword. Hiding items in completely nondescript locations is a trend that really died out as video games became more popular. Can you imagine how salty Call of Duty players would be if key items that basically had to be found in order to win were hidden in locations that didn't have a single marking or anything to indicate something is there? Reddit would explode. I'm not a huge fan of this myself, but when games were as simple as they were in the 80s, I can understand why devs added features like this. Let's talk about what this game did right. Unlike some of the games we've played at this point, each of the 7 levels were very different and each had their own unique soundtrack. In an NES game, this was truly appreciated. The soundtracks were short, but at least I didn't have to listen to the same one for the entire game. It had a nice variety of special items to be found, though before I read the manual and got the full scope of the story, it seemed very odd that I found a gun in what appeared to be a medieval timeline. What is absolutely fantastic is that you can actually choose between all these different items you pick up in the level when you go into the pause menu. Being able to do this in an RPG or even platformer is taken for granted these days, but this is the first game I played on this channel that gave this option, so I found it very exciting. Where this game really begins to show its age though, aside from the graphics of course, is the controls. I'm trying to keep in mind that the NES controller only had 2 buttons and a D-pad, but at the end of the day my job is to inform you if this is a game worth playing. The game does stretch the limited buttons as much as possible by introducing combos such as using pushing down or up on the D-pad and pushing A or B. For example, if you push B by itself, you swing your knife, but if you push B while pushing up on the D-pad, then your falcon detaches itself from your shoulder. Then if you push B while pushing down on the D-pad, your falcon does its swoop attack. In the end though, it feels a bit clunky and difficult to pull off fast combinations in order to keep the damage you take to a minimum. Though apparently, in 2-player mode, one controls the falcon and the other controls the human. I wasn't able to give this a try, but I could definitely see myself having fun playing this as a kid with my younger brother. On the topic of taking damage though, Jesus, this guy's knife sword thing needs to be a few pixels longer. Combat windows can be extremely tight and require a lot of practice in order to understand how to take down enemies without suffering damage yourself. And considering that the enemies constantly respawn when you leave the room, you're taking down a lot of enemies. Not to mention how difficult it can be to time your attacks properly against the enemies that fly up and down. Some of the enemies move incredibly fast in a very tight space, and I felt like there really wasn't any other option but to tank the damage and just keep jabbing away. The LPE rating system is primarily based on is it worth your time to play today, and 8 Eyes gets 4 out of 7. Overall, this game is a solid platformer. There's jumping, there's combat, and there's a whole lot of puzzles that keep you entertained for hours. The clunky controls and awkward combat is mostly a hardware limitation of the NES, but I do need to keep them in mind when determining the rating because I don't want to recommend a game that would just be frustrating to play. If you enjoyed this episode and want to see more NES games, hit that like button, get subscribed, hit the bell even if you really like the content, and I'll see you in the next one.